Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Spurs Up Show presented by the Armchair All-Americans. I'm your host, Chris Phillips, joined as always by my friend and colleague, Tyler Clark. Before we get started today, be sure to go online. If you haven't done so yet, not sure what you're doing at this point, the best Gamecock podcast on the internet by far, the Spurs Up Show. Be sure to go rate, subscribe, share, and download the Spurs Up Show on iTunes, the Stitcher app, wherever you consume your podcast, consume your media. Also, be sure to follow us on our social media handles. We're at Twitter at ArmchairSCar. That's going to be at ArmchairSCAR. Instagram at ArmchairSCarolina. And again, this is a podcast brought to you by the Armchair All-Americans, armchairameriCans.com. Be sure to go check us out there. All of our content, latest breaking Gamecock news and coverage. Again, Armchair All-Americans, we're localizing your sports coverage content. So be sure to go to armchairameriCans.com for all of your coverage there as well. So like I mentioned, we're back. This is another episode of the Spurs Up Show, episode 37. We are going to be previewing the college baseball season. Tyler, it's finally baseball season. It's here. Opening day is just, I guess, 3 days away now. The Gamecocks host VMI on Friday in a 3-game series to kick off the year, to kick off year one of the Mark Kingston era. Before we get to that, I'll ask you, Tyler, I know you've been, coaching up a lot of baseball as well, and obviously I know you're ready for the baseball season to start, so I'll ask, how you been? How's everything been going with school and obviously, with everything you've had going on as well?
It's good, man. I can't complain.
Yeah, I can't either. I'm actually liking these morning shows. I got a little coffee here. I stayed up late last night to put everything together. I'm feeling good, man. I like these morning shows. Kind of get the day started off on a good note.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
For sure. So, like I mentioned, we're going to be previewing the 2018 baseball season. Just to recap a little bit of what happened last year, not too much. Obviously, the Gamecocks went 35-25, missed out in the postseason. For I believe it was the second time in the last 3 years. We all know what happened with Chad Holbrook and his staff. A lot of those let go. So like I said, Tyler, this is year one of Mark Kingston. Kingston comes a pretty solid pedigree, was a head coach at South Florida before this, has worked at big-time powers like Miami. We all know about his pedigree and have kind of talked about that, in full length. The biggest thing I want to start, talking about, Tyler, is, and I want to get your opinion on this. What do you think is going to be the biggest change from the Chad Holbrook era over to the Mark Kingston era, if any?
I think Mark Kingston's biggest philosophy, is hitting. And it's not so much just hitting, singles and stealing bases. It's not small ball. It is, doubles, triples, homers. I could tell. I had a chance to hear him speak along with the rest of the staff about a month ago. And you could tell his philosophy is he wants to score runs and score them through power. So there will be guys that he thinks that can either hit the gap or hit it over the fence. And I think that's definitely the biggest difference between last season is just the approach at the plate.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. From what I've heard, Mark Kingston's an absolute boss. I mean, I know I said you went down and went to his coach's clinic and kind of heard from him and Skylar Mead and a couple other guys. And I definitely think that's going to be the biggest change this year, just from year one of the Mark Kingston era. What are fans going to see is a complete philosophical change, just a different type of mental approach, I think. I mean, I'm not saying Chad Holbrook did anything wrong, and, I don't want to dive into, marking off a list what Chad Holbrook could have done, but I just definitely think this year, coming into the season, fans are going to see, like you mentioned, a different approach at the plate. Like you said, I definitely think Mark Kingston definitely focuses on more so lifting the baseball, driving the baseball out of the ballpark, more of a Ray Tanner, Ray Tanner type approach. And then pitching as well, be interesting to see how Skylar Mead's what kind of impact he has, the new pitching coach. From what I've heard from a couple of sources, the players all love him. They're real players, coaches, and but Mark Kingston knows when to put his foot down. So I think the philosophical change and the mental approach for the Gamecocks will be the biggest change, just coming from Chad Holbrook to Mark Kingston. While some people, I think a lot of people are high on this team as far as talent-wise goes and what Mark Kingston can do a year one. Obviously, as we know, South Carolina wasn't ranked in any of the major preseason polls. I think maybe they were ranked in one poll, but really weren't ranked in any preseason polls. So I think a lot of people are expecting, obviously, Florida is going to come back and be loaded. As we know, they are the reigning national champ. You got Vanderbilt. Kentucky was a real big surprise last year. The SEC is going to be solid. I think a lot of people are, tabbing, the Gamecocks were finished fourth in the SEC East. So, I'm not sure exactly what the expectations are, for Kingston year one. Personally, for me, Tyler, what, I have here, what would you consider a success in year one for Mark Kingston? For me, it's simply making the postseason. I mean, I think this is a team, even with the losses on, on the pitching staff, which we're going to get to in just a second. I think, with Carolina baseball, this is a team that has enough talent to make the postseason and should be in the postseason. I think those are realistic expectations. I think those are expectations that I know the team has and that Kingston has as well. But, he realized that when he took the job, that's kind of the standard, I think. I'm not sure that South Carolina, has the pieces to host a regional, but I think without a doubt, this is a team that can certainly, I think, realistically make the postseason. I'll ask you the same question. What would you consider, successful year one of Mark Kingston? Do you think what I mentioned are realistic expectations, or do you expect a little bit more, a little bit less?
I think making a regional is extremely realistic, and I think that's pretty much. I'm not going to say that's their goal. I'm sure they have way higher goals than that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But the team that didn't make the postseason last year, you could see that there was so much just left on the field. That was, such a talented baseball team. But now you go through a complete coaching change. I feel like that's an extremely realistic expectation for an SEC East team to make it into the postseason.
Yeah, and I was going to say too. I mean, that team almost made the postseason, and I mean, I feel like everything that could have went wrong last year did. I mean, every close game they could lose, they lost it. I mean, you could definitely tell down the stretch mentally the team was just. I mean, so drained. I mean, how could you not be? There were so many Sunday ball games that just didn't go South Carolina's way. And, I was actually, when I was putting this together, I came across the clip of Seth Beer's home run against Josh Reagan. I still haven't gotten over that, I don't think. So just games like that. I mean, this team, as bad as a year as this team had last year, they were still pretty close to making the postseason. So I think without a doubt, you have to think that trend is going to reverse itself a little bit this year. I think – I just think with a new rejuvenated kind of spirit and new rejuvenated mindset, I definitely think is going to help them a ton. And I think they've probably got a newfound confidence as well, especially the hitters. But instead of the hitters, we're going to start first with the pitching staff, the rotation, the bullpen. Obviously, I think is my favorite thing to talk about, seeing as I was a pitcher in college. But and I think probably the most important thing for the Gamecocks as well. South Carolina, as we know, loses 2 of their 3 weekend starters. And Clark Schmidt and Will Crow, both big-time guys that were drafted in the MLB draft last summer, excuse me. The hardest hit, I'd say, Tyler, was in the bullpen. You lose Tyler Johnson, you lose Josh Reagan, you lose Reed Scott, some really veteran guys you could rely on while they weren't always perfect last year. I mean, all 3 of those guys, had a pretty solid campaign, especially, I mean, even a guy like Tyler Johnson, even when he wasn't perfect, you have a guy coming out of the bullpen, throwing upper 90s. Is always a comforting thing. All of those guys were drafted. All those guys are playing minor league ball right now. As of right now, the projected rotation, you got Adam Hill, who comes from the Sunday slot, slides into the Friday slot. I tell you what's funny. I remember we looked at this last spring, Tyler, after the postseason. But Adam Hill's stats last year, he had a 3.04 ERA and went 3-6 overall.
That's horrible.
It speaks to the hitting woes, his run support, which we'll get to. I don't know if they have that. I don't think they have that list in the stats, but I'd love to see what his run support was per game. But anyways, Adam Hill will slide into that Friday night spot on Saturday. Mark Kingston, he's announced at least 2/3 of his rotation. He's going to go with Cody Morris, the tall right-hander. Really talented kid, is a guy that has stuff sort of like Tyler Johnson. I feel he's a real big kid, 6'4". Fastball sits 93 to 96. He can settle in at 91 to 94 as well if he really needs to pump it up. And I've heard he's hit 97, but got a really heavy sink on his fastball. Really good breaking ball and a nice changeup as well. So if he can command his pitches, I mean, I think that's going to be the big thing for Cody Morris. I think he's got the potential to be a big time guy on Saturdays for South Carolina. And then I think right now, I know Mark Kingston said it's either going to be one of the Chapmans, either right-handed pitcher Logan Chapman or right-handed pitcher Ridge Chapman, who's a JUCO transfer. But I think Logan Chapman right now, from what I'm hearing, if I had to guess, I think Logan Chapman is going to be the guy. 91 and 93 with his fastball. Says he sits with an 89, 91. When he's having good command. Got a nice 12-6 curveball and then a good changeup as well. So another 3-pitch guy for Carolina. Talk about Tyler, I'll ask you first because I'm really intrigued. Adam Hill, obviously, is a freshman. I think he went 7-0, was in that Sunday slot. In the Sunday slot again last year, we mentioned kind of the lack of run support. Do you feel like from watching Adam Hill for 2 years, how confident do you feel about Adam Hill sliding in that Friday night spot and being kind of the guy. Because as we know, I mean, being a Friday night starter in the SEC is much, much different than being a Sunday guy. I mean, it's all about setting the tone and kind of being a bulldog and, like I said, setting the tone for the weekends. Talk about, how do you feel about Adam Hill sliding in that role?
I like it. Looking at his stats, you can't really tell it, but if you look deeper into the stats, you can see that he's got really good stuff. He definitely has command. There were a couple of games last year, I know, on Sundays that that command kind of left him. But after a full off season, you're going into your junior year. I think you got to understand that it's time to go. Time to go.
No, yeah, for sure. And you
mentioned. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying there was a lot of stuff like preseason polls that had him, ranked as one of the best college baseball prospects, just pitchers. I think he's ready to take it to the next level. He has great stuff. Definitely the stuff of a Friday night guy, but if he can just get that command, be more consistent a little bit, he's definitely got the makings of a good Friday night pitcher.
Yeah, I agree. And what I was just going to say to kind of, comment what you said about how he kind of lost his control a little bit, here and there, obviously, as all pitchers do. I do think he has kind of that bulldog mentality. I mean, every time he seemed to get in a jam or kind of lose control, he's always been a guy to kind of go back, reset, and be able to get out of tough situations. And I think to be a Friday night guy, again, I think that's kind of the biggest thing that you have to have is be a bulldog, be thick-skinned, be tough. Really, like I said, I say it over and over again, but set the tone for your team and set the tone for the weekend. I mean, there's a lot of times, even if you lose a ball game 2-1, you can still sort of set the tone for your team and bring that, that toughness to the team. And, like I said, just get your guys set up to, at least win the next two, or maybe even sweep if you win your game. So, Friday night, we all know how big Friday night is in the SEC and, non-conference as well. Another guy that was named by Mark Kingston, Eddie Demarius, is going to be the closer for the Gamecocks, apparently. Kind of someone Gamecock fans probably aren't familiar with. He's pretty new. As a JUCO transfer, another JUCO transfer for the Gamecocks. Demarius, really, really good stuff from what I've heard. I know that all the players that I've seen, we actually posted that on Twitter that Demarius got the closer role. All the players obviously love him, are really high on him. From what I've read, he's in the 90 to 93 range, so he's obviously not, Tyler Johnson-esque velocity. Doesn't have maybe his stuff, but I heard he's got a pretty good slider. And then I think another guy, since we're talking bullpen, that I think is bound to have a big year, will probably start a lot of midweek games, but Colby Lee. I'm not sure if you remember Tyler, but he had a really good year last year as a freshman. Had a really good end to last season as well. But I would not be shocked to see him, get a couple of midweek games, at least starting a couple of midweek games, but definitely be used in like the 7th or 8th inning, kind of as a setup man. And then finally, Ridge Chapman, like I said, the JUCO transfer. Somebody, again, they're really high on, like I said, a lot of new faces, but they said he's 92, 94, has a power slider. Somebody that I think the Gamecocks will lean on. So these are kind of the guys they're high on. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, the bullpen's shaking out. Bottom line for them, I think, without kind of going into detail of the guys they have, is it's just all going to be about, especially early, finding who fits in what roles. Because, as we saw from last year, I mean, things can get shuffled around a lot. You never know when injuries are going to hit. I mean, you have Demarius as the closer right now, but, I think especially when you're coming into an unknown where guys are unproven, I mean, I think, their outings are going to be kind of their tryouts. And I mean, in big time Division I college baseball, I mean, you can ask anybody. You have one or two bad outings, and you might not get another shot all season. You might get replaced. So the pressure is going to be on for these guys for sure. I mean, these early series and these early midweek games are going to be big time for them, just to prove that they can fill those roles and be big time for the Gamecocks. I mean, I think that's what it all comes down to. Tyler, would you say that the bullpen is your biggest area of concern? Just looking at kind of the youth and experience they have there.
Oh, absolutely. You could see, last year's bullpen had trouble at times, and you lose 70% of your innings from a year ago. That's definitely your biggest area of concern going in. But it's a new coaching staff. I know all the guys love Skylar Meade. He's a super cool dude, and he really knows what he's talking about. So if these guys can, use their experience from last year and take a step to the next level, they could be decent, but it's definitely an area of concern going in.
Yeah, I think Mead, like you mentioned, I know all the players love Mead. I think Mead is going again. I think he's just going to bring sort of what Kingston's going to bring to the whole team. I think Mead's going to kind of bring that mental toughness and that swagger this pitching staff was missing last year. Again, I thought just last year, it's more so when you're in the bullpen and you're a closer. It's more so just about being tough, being able to kind of bear down, make a pitch, get out of a jam, stuff like that. So, like I said, it'll be interesting because, again, it's one thing to look really good and have the stuff when you're in a scrimmage or you're in an inter squad, but when you get under the lights, when you face Florida, the opening SEC series, it's going to be interesting to see who kind of steps up and who doesn't. So one of the big concerns I think that it has been talked about in the preseason a little bit is the lack of lefties on this baseball team. So only 3 left-handed pitchers on the team. Obviously, being a former left-handed pitcher myself, I was a little disappointed in that. But Tyler, is that something that really, you're a baseball guy, just looking from not even just a South Carolina Gamecocks team perspective, but a baseball perspective, is that something that worries you when you look at a team, is the lack of lefties, or do you think it's not that big of a deal in college baseball?
I love lefties more than anybody in the world, but if you got 3, I feel like you can work with it a little bit. You start to find the guys. Or start to find the right-handers that look a little deceptive to lefties, so you can kind of figure out which guys you want to throw against lefties if you can't throw a lefty against them. But we'll see going in. I think that's another thing you have to analyze. A few weeks into the season, whether it's a problem or not.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they play matchups. Then, I mean, if they, again, all they got's the left-hander Corey Stone is one. Hank Nichols, a sophomore. Corey Stone, who is a freshman. And then John Gilreath, who is the early enrollee freshman, friend of the show for sure. What's up, John? But, yeah, the early enrollee, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, again, you don't know. I mean, obviously, we're not out at the scrimmages or anything like that. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. All those guys are really, really young, and I don't know if they even have one inning pitched amongst the 3 of them. So –
of course, I've seen him pitch in high school. He's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be interesting to see just how they use those guys, how quickly they thrust those guys, and you have to imagine, in the early going, these non-conference series, that they're going to give these younger guys every possible opportunity. I mean, you open with 3 against VMI, then you've got North Florida on Tuesday, Winthrop Wednesday, then you got 3 against Charleston Southern. I mean, those are all games I think we can agree, Tyler, that you should have a good shot to win. So I think trying to get, obviously focus on winning the series, sweeping if at all possible, but getting these young guys in there, kind of trying some guys out in some different roles, I think would be really, really beneficial for this team. So, like I said, it'll be interesting. I mean, I know the pitching staff loses a lot, but I think what a lot of people forget from last year too, I mean, this team was riddled with injuries. I mean, as far as, I know the Gamecocks lose Clark Schmidt and Will Crow, but I mean, you think Clark Schmidt didn't pitch the majority of the season. So, I think they had to really learn to live without him last year. So, again, it'll be interesting. I really like Cody Morris on Saturdays. I think he has a chance to be a star. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of guys that are unproven, but I think the biggest thing in the pitching staff is that there's a ton of talent on this team, and I think you're going to see the impact of Skylar Meade. Like I said, the toughness, and he's going to bring, the players all love him. I think they're all going to play their tails off for him and pitch their tails off. And the thing Mark Kingston emphasized the most, he said, we want guys that are going to throw strikes. We absolutely do not want to walk guys. The biggest thing is he said, we've got guys that have a lot of good stuff, but who's going to throw the most strikes are the guys that we're going to throw out there, because obviously walks kill and errors kill. So, like I said, I think it'll be a little bit of trial and error early on with the bullpen, but you got to get it figured out quick before you, take on Clemson in that huge non-conference series at the beginning of March. So one area on the South Carolina roster that is not lacking any experience and does have some, we'll say, quote unquote, proven guys, a lot of experience training at least, is the hitters. So talking about the hitting overall, kind of the position players, like I mentioned, tons and tons of experience. The one thing about that experience, though, not a single hitter last year that returns hit over 300. Not a single hitter on the Gamecocks roster hit over 300. You had Jacob Olsen at 294, which led the team. However, you got Carlos Cortez returning, hit 12 home runs last year. Tyler, he's a guy, obviously has gotten some preseason accolades. I don't have him pulled up all now, but he's a guy who has been talked about a ton, hit 12 home runs and really, what I thought was limited, pretty limited action, had a huge SEC tournament, had 3 home runs there. And Hoover, I think we both remember kind of where his season took off when he hit a grand slam at Auburn. Talk about what you think his potential is this season. How good can he be for the Gamecocks?
I think he could be a potential All-American. I think he's that good. I know he got a lot of work. Pretty sure he was Cape Cod League last year and did really well there. I remember he got a lot of praise. Very, very excited. I've seen him. He's hit a couple home runs in the scrimmages off the Gamecock pitcher. So I think he could have a very good season coming up and potentially be one of the best in the country. I
agree. You think he could get to 20 home runs?
I don't know about 20.
20's a lot. 20's a lot.
I say 15 would be pretty cool. But I mean, 20 wouldn't be. He got 12 last year and didn't play a lot of non-conference and even some of the of conference play. So it's possible.
Yeah, I don't want to say that he'll. I thought about it. I don't want to say that he'll hit 20 because the last time I said a South Carolina hitter would hit 20, it was Alex Destino last year, and that just did not happen. So I forgot that he couldn't hit a curveball. I think that's what it was. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, so like we mentioned earlier, I completely agree with you, by the way. I think Carlos Cortez absolutely is an All-American caliber player. He's a kid that's after next year is going to be should be a very high draft pick. It's going to be fun to see him man the outfield for sure. So, like you talked about earlier, Tyler, you were able to, because I want to get your take on this, because you were actually able to go down and sit in a coach's conference down in, where were you guys at? You were at the beach?
It was at Myrtle Beach.
Right? Myrtle Beach, okay. Yeah, you're at a coach's conference, though. Got to kind of hear Mark Kingston, Skylar Meade, those guys. To me, and we talked about this earlier, the biggest change in the lineup and hitting this year, again, will be philosophy. I mean, it's going to be way, way less small ball. There was a whole bunch of criticism on Chad Holbrook about bunting, which I don't even want to get into. I think Gamecock fans would be happy with never bunting again. But talk about, what you heard from Mark Kingston, kind of what his hitting philosophy is, what maybe South Carolina has been doing differently that he talked about. Just kind of give us an inside look at, what the Gamecocks hitting philosophy will be in 2018.
So he wants to build a lineup with the best combination of 9 guys that do 3 different things, which are, get base hits and go gap to gap and then hit home runs. So he wants the best combination of all 3 of those. He doesn't want to just sell out on 1 or 2. He wants all 3. So there will probably be 3 of each kind of hitter in this lineup. How he constructs it, that's up to him. But he ideally wants 3 guys that can, send it in the gap and 3 guys that he thinks can hit it over the fence.
No, yeah, absolutely. I know you talked about as well in the batting cages. They have like the launch monitor or whatever, and
it's hit tracks.
Hit tracks, okay.
So basically, it's like a computer program that sits in front of you while you're in the cages indoors. And it has a TV screen, so it'll have the pitching stats coming from the guy that's throwing, guys that can hit it. So it'll go launch angle, exit velocity, all the 2018 stats. And on the computer monitor, it'll have a baseball stadium for the major leagues, and it'll tell you, what's a home run, where you hit it on the field, in a gap, down the line, so. And Coach Kingston was saying that a lot of the guys were staying until like 2 a.m. having tournaments to see who can hit the ball the farthest at different stadiums, which I thought was pretty cool.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I don't know that Gamecock fans would be too upset if South Carolina tried to kind of get back to, maybe those teams that were, the mid 2000s, late 2000s teams that, lifted the baseball, hit a lot of home runs. I mean, obviously with the bats being kind of like they are, I don't know if we'll ever see numbers like that again. But I mean, Founders Park is the kind of park I think you got to be able to take advantage of, especially, if you're South Carolina, you have to be able to take advantage of that park because, as we both know, it's a porch. I mean, it can really be a porch, especially down the lines, especially to left field for right-handed hitters. It is an absolute launching pad. Like I said, I think it seemed like a lot of times last year, I felt like South Carolina hitters went to the plate with just way too much going through their heads, trying to do way too much. It definitely sounds like from what you're saying, Mark Kingston's trying to kind of simplify things, kind of letting the guys, he's identifying what their strengths are, letting the guys kind of be who they are, and then take that approach to the plate. But I think one of the biggest things this season for this South Carolina lineup, because there's a ton of talent there, and there's a ton of guys who have played and have contributed in some way, shape, or form. But the biggest thing for this South Carolina team is guys that really need to take that next step as hitters, and really as contributors. I mean, you've got guys like Chris Cullen, who obviously was battling injury all last year, but he's a guy I think that has the potential to have a big-time year, be a real power contributor. He needs to step up. What's going to happen at first base? I mean, I think Matt Williams is probably going to get a lot of playing time. You've also got Riley Hogan there as well, though. Somebody's got to step up to man the first base. Madison Stokes is another guy I think that really, really needs to step up. The senior, has played a ton, but really hasn't done anything, I would say, special. I mean, he hit like 224 last year. I heard he was really roping the ball in fall inter squads and stuff like that, but it's bringing it to the big show. I mean, bringing it to weekends and midweek games and actually under the lights. So, and then Jonah Bride, Carlos Cortez. I mean, I think Cortez can speak for himself, but a guy like Jonah Bride, Jacob Olson, building on what he did last year. I mean, there's a ton of guys, Tyler, I think that, while there's a ton of talent, I think there's a lot of guys that have something to prove this season. And, I think Mark Kingston's, that change in philosophy, I think maybe the biggest thing that shines through for those guys.
Yeah, I think Madison Stokes is the biggest guy. I think from year to year, he's going to have, a big change from last year. Coach Kingston talked about him a lot and the progress he's made since he's gotten here. A senior, he's a great ball player, great shortstop. I think he'll have a big improvement from last year, which isn't saying much if you hit 220, but I think he'll have a pretty good season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think with Stokes, it's just more so consistency because you've seen it before. I mean, yeah. I've definitely seen it before. It's just about being consistent. I think he was really one of the biggest guys that you could just tell. I feel like when he went to the plate, sometimes you could just see the thoughts literally running through his head. I think he's one of those guys. Just simplify the game, kind of slow down the game as much as possible and let it come to you. I mean, I think again, the philosophy change for Kingston, I think will help a guy like Madison Stokes a ton. Now there are a couple of newcomers that will be making contributions I didn't mention yet to this lineup, guys. Again, that Gamecock fans do not know a whole lot about. But one guy we've heard a ton about is Noah Campbell. I fully expect him to start at second base. Campbell, really athletic kid. Heard he's a really physical middle infielder. And has a good bat as well. Has some power, pretty good power for a guy who's a middle infielder. That's not quite as big. I mean, 5'11", 193. That's a pretty solid build for a freshman second baseman, I guess you could say. The kid out of Durham, North Carolina. And then also one I've heard a lot about is Kyle Jacobson, the outfielder. He was actually listed, I think, as one of the top 50 freshman prospects. Not freshman prospect because he's not a freshman. He was listed as one of the top 2019 prospects because he actually will be, I believe, eligible for the 2019 draft next year. I believe I read that.
I read that as well. Yeah, I read that one.
Yeah. He should be eligible for the draft next year, either way. So, anyways, Kyle Jacobson, a guy 6 foot, 177 out of Ackworth, Georgia, is a guy I've heard a ton about again. I think the biggest thing for those guys is, again, you can do all of that in inter squads and practices and scrimmages and all that good stuff. But, it's kind of about making that transition from, because when you go from those inter squads to the actual games, everything's going to kind of speed up just a tick. And especially when you get to SEC play and you're playing against Clemson, it's going to speed up another tick. So how those guys sort of transition in, but I fully expect a guy like Noah Campbell and really both those guys to start or, at least play a lot. So, talking about the lineup a little bit, Tyler, you obviously see I kind of listed my lineup out here. Is there any changes you would make? Is there obviously this isn't like in order of batting order, but I tried to kind of make a predicted lineup, if you will, of who I think will be starting on opening day. So I'll go through it. I've got Chris Cullen at catcher, Matt Williams at first. Like I mentioned, Noah Campbell at second. I think Madison Stokes is probably going to start at shortstop, but LT Tolbert's got to fit in there somewhere, I feel like. Again, there's a DH spot that I'm not adding in here as well. So this is just in the field. But I think Madison Stokes will probably start at short. Jonah Bride at third, manning that down. I think he's one of the best third basemen in the conference, if not the country, especially defensively. And then your outfield, Cortez, Jacobson, and Olson. Is there anything you change about that? Anybody that I don't think I forgot anybody, but anything
not
you
as of right now. I've heard Kingston talk a lot about Noah Campbell and Kyle Jacobson. And he sees them as guys that are ready to step in. and a switch hitter second baseman. I love that. So yeah, I mean that's another thing. Baseball is just so weird because you have to see it first before you can analyze it. It's not like football where you can kind of project it. It's a lot more about guys that can go out there and do it when the lights are on. So it's hard to tell.
It's a hard game to predict, man. That's for sure. And then, of course, you're going to have Adam Hill starting, that first game with Cody Morris going Saturday. So with that being said, I mean, there's definitely some guys that I did not mention that I want to make sure I go over as well that I think are going to be big-time contributors. Danny Blair was a guy that I loved watching last year. From Bel Air, Maryland. I really feel like Danny Blair always brought a spark to this Gamecock team. I know he only had one home run and like 9 RBIs, but he was a guy that I always felt like really brought a spark to this team last year, and they were sort of struggling. TJ Hopkins, probably one of my favorite players on this Gamecock team, is just an absolute baller. I mean, you look at TJ Hopkins, Tyler, to me, you just look at that guy and you say he's a ball player. Like every time I see him, he's got a dirty jersey. He's busting his ass. I mean, I feel like you look at that guy, like he's a real ball player. So I think he's another guy that's going to have a big time year. Carmen Mlodzinski's a guy, a freshman that I've heard good things about as well. He actually suffered an injury Sunday in the inner squad, but from sources I talked to within the Gamecock baseball program, he's going to be all right. Everything should be good to go there. Again, Riley Hogan's another guy I think could step up and have a big year. I think, again, he's going to split time at first base. Hunter Taylor, again, with Chris Cullen behind the plate. It's going to be interesting. I mean, like I said, I definitely did not want to leave those guys out, and there's probably some guys we don't even know about that are going to contribute this season. It'll be interesting to see for sure. Like I said, I think Gilreath's another guy that has a really good chance to – I think he's probably going to pitch a lot midweek to start out. Like I said, I think they're going to want to try to find one or two lefties that can contribute in SEC play. I think they're going to make it a point to kind of, weed those guys out and see who's going to be a big-time contributor for them down the road. As far as this team, because we're going to talk a little bit about, obviously it's extremely hard, Tyler, to make predictions for baseball, but we're going to do it because that's what we do here. What would you say, we already talked about, I guess the bullpen will be the biggest concern, but what would you say coming into this season, year one of Mark Kingston, what would you say is, the thing that you're most intrigued by or you're most excited to see about this team moving forward?
I want to see how the guys from last season that were in the lineup a lot, day to day. I want to see how they transfer from new coaching into this season. I want to see, if they hit more home runs, if their average goes up, if their average goes down, how they run the bases. I'm just interested to see how he transforms these guys into a different team. It's tough going from it's tough coming into a new coach, and as a player, you're trying to decide, what you want to take from them or what you want to, remember from your old staff. So I want to see how they buy in. I want to see how it transforms the team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you. My biggest thing that I want to, I'm most intrigued to see is the weekend rotation. Again, Adam Hill, I think this is kind of his. If everything goes right for Adam Hill this year, he should not come back next year. He's got that good of stuff. He's that good of a player. Now, if he wants to come back, I wouldn't be mad, obviously. Being a fan, but he's the kind of guy Friday night, I think he can really take that next step, be one of the best pitchers in the SEC, if not the country. I mean, Clark Schmidt last year, I put this up yesterday on our Twitter account. Clark Schmidt was actually, before he got hurt, and I guess he had enough innings to qualify because it was on the NCAA website. He finished second in the country in ERA with a 1.34 ERA. I mean, that kid was on pace to have a fantastic season. I mean, it showed how highly regarded he was. What did he get drafted? I mean, he got drafted first round. I think it's like the
16th overall by the Yankees.
16th overall. He didn't pitch half the season. So, I mean, that tells you how highly they thought of him.
Arm injury too. Yeah.
I mean, it just shows you how highly they thought of him. And then you had Will Crow coming back from Tommy John. And I'm just interested to see again. There's a lot of unknowns with this pitching staff, but I think there's a lot of talent as well. So I'm just really intrigued to see, because I know Adam Hill. I think Adam Hill's the known. He's going to be the leader of that weekend rotation. But I'm really intrigued to see what's going to happen. How does this team respond when they hit adversity? Because there's obviously going to be a weekend that comes where Adam Hill does not have his best stuff, or he simply, they just get beat, simply put. And, if you go down 0-1 and you turn to a guy, Cody Morris, an unknown, on Saturday, and then you go to Sunday, you turn to another unknown, how are those guys going to respond? Because this team last year, and, like I said, I'm not going to point any fingers at who the blame can be put on, but I think it's safe to say this team did not respond to adversity very well last year. And there was a ton of it. I mean, there was an absolute ton of it. So, I think, there was a lot of opportunity for them to do so. But I'm interested to see kind of the mental makeup and how these guys respond to adversity. I mean, they're like I've mentioned before, South Carolina has never been good at anything or won anything without being a tough team. So I'm very, very intrigued to see that. Before I get into predictions, Tyler, I did want to take a look because I'm pretty intrigued at this. The schedule for the Gamecocks. Want to go through the schedule really, really quick if my computer will cooperate. Here we go. So the Gamecocks open up with 3 against VMI. I'm going to highlight the bigger series because I think we know about the non-conference and stuff. Obviously, March 2nd to 4th, South Carolina plays Clemson in Founders Park Friday, Greenville Saturday, Clemson Sunday. Always a very contested series. Will be another huge series. I'll actually be at the Greenville game. Very excited about that. Gamecocks open SEC play, Tyler, against the defending national champions, the Florida Gators, at Founders Park, March 16th, 17th, and 18th. Then travel to Georgia for 3 the next weekend. Host Tennessee in a 3-game set. Then have a midweek game against North Carolina and Charlotte. Tyler, let me ask you this. Do you think there's any chance South Carolina keeps that game within 10 runs?
Let's hope so.
Yeah, I mean, it's
pretty
crazy.
Bad. They haven't competed once.
I think last year I literally told you, I was like, well, my one prediction is that we won't lose 15-0. I think they lost like 12-0.
It was bad.
So there's definitely some redemption. Do what?
I don't even understand that game. I don't even think North Carolina was that good last year either.
We just lay an egg when we play them. I don't get it. But yeah, so that'll be another fun one. I'll be at that one because it's right down the street from me. I'll be at the Knight Stadium, BB&T Ballpark in Charlotte. Again, then South Carolina goes on the road for 3 at Kentucky, a resurgent Kentucky team that was preseason top 10. Followed that up with another weekend at Arkansas, who was another super regional team. Then you host LSU, which will be a very fun series, April 20th through 22nd. LSU, just a traditional powerhouse. I mean, should be a really fun one at Founders Park. Then you travel to Vanderbilt to end out April. And then finally start off May, 3 at home against Ole Miss, 3 at home against Missouri, and then close the season out at Texas A&M for 3. Texas A&M, a team, very, very talented baseball team, a team that was in the regionals last year. I'm not sure if they made the super regionals or not. I forget. But either way, I mean, when you're in the SEC, sort of a gauntlet. I think South Carolina sort of got away with not too terrible of a road schedule. I know I was talking to John Gillen yesterday about Ole Miss's road baseball schedule, and it was pretty brutal. So, sets up. It should be interesting for South Carolina. There's definitely some interesting matchups again at Kentucky, at Arkansas, LSU at home, opening with Florida. Obviously, is going to set the tone, I think, for the season for a conference play at least. So that's going to move us into Tyler. I'm going to start. We'll talk a little predictions for 2018 again. Actually, I'm going to let you start with this. We're going to talk predictions for 2018 again. Baseball, the hardest game to predict. So many things can happen, but year one of the Mark Kingston era. How do you see it playing out?
I see them as it's so hard. I just see them as a regional team that doesn't make it out of a regional, but you can still see progression from year to year. I think they'll be one of the 2 or 3 seeds, but it all depends on this weekend pitching and these unknowns if they can come through, just be serviceable, and if the offense can back them up. I feel like the offense could be so much better than it was last year. Which could help those Saturday, Sunday guys out, especially midweek too. We saw there were so many guys that pitched midweek last year that just didn't have it. They kept having to go to different guy. So hopefully this year, you can figure out who your guys are at least a little better, a little bit more consistency. And I see them as a team that definitely has the potential to be in a regional. I'll say that. So that's my prediction. They make a regional. it's definitely realistic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think this team, there's a ton of unknowns, especially in the pitching staff, even with the, the lineup they have coming back. Will those guys be able to take the next step, be able to contribute? I'll say this, the pieces are there. I think, again, Mark Kingston's the right man for this job. I know there was a lot of a lot of talk about when he first got hired, kind of a lot of unknowns with him. Nobody really knew who he was, but I definitely think Tyler, from what we've heard from him as far as when he got hired, the conversations you've heard from him as well. He's definitely the right guy for this job. He's a baseball mind. He's got his philosophy set. Again, bringing in Skylar Meade was huge for this team. Again, I agree with you to a sense. I think, again, it's going to come down to the unknowns. What does the rest of the weekend staff do on Saturday and Sunday? How does the bullpen respond? How does Demarius do in the closer role? Can guys like Jacob Olson, Cortez, Jonah Bride, Stokes, some of the older guys kind of take the next step? Can Cortez lead this offense in that 3 or 4 slot, which I expect him to be in? Me personally, I mean, I definitely think South Carolina will make the postseason. I think they will make a regional. I would not be surprised to see them do more than that. I wouldn't be surprised to see them. The bottom line is this: if they get what they think they can get out of Cody Morris alone, and they have a decent bullpen, I think hosting a regional is extremely possible for this team. I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing. It just can Cody Morris be consistent enough, because he's got the stuff, but can he learn to pitch and locate and use all 3 of his pitches and go 5, 6, 7 innings into ball games instead of, blowing it out 1 or 2 innings? So I think a lot of people were surprised. I think some people kind of expected him to be in the closer role. So, will he be able to lengthen his outings? Will he be able to, be a Saturday starter in the SEC? My overall prediction, I think South Carolina, I'm going to go bold, will host a regional. I'm not sure if they'll get out of it or not, but I think they will host a regional. Again, I think it's really hard to predict. I think South Carolina will finish, I'll say, 3rd in the SEC East behind Florida and Kentucky. I think those are really two good ball clubs. But the SEC is extremely competitive, not just this year, but every year. But there's some really good ball clubs, and I think South Carolina is going to take a really big positive step. The one thing I'll predict for sure is I just think South Carolina is going to be more fun to watch this year too. You at least hope so. But I think for sure, just with the mindset change, the culture change that Mark Kingston's brought in, I really believe in this team, believe in the guys. There's a lot of veteran leadership on this team. You've got a couple of new pieces as well. I think South Carolina will be able to take that next step, make the regional. And who knows beyond that? I mean, who knows? Once you get in the regional, once you get in the postseason, it's a new game from there. So, yeah, that'll pretty much do it, I guess. Kiss the ring, I guess. I guess I should say that. Just in conclusion, I'm not sure if any of you guys saw right now, we are giving away a Michael Roth art piece. We just like to give stuff away, Tyler. I don't know why I like to give so much stuff away. I looked at that Roth piece. I was like, I'd like to keep that, honestly. But yeah, we're giving away a Michael Roth art piece. If you haven't seen, to be eligible to win it, I mean, it's really simple. Go to Armchair SCAR on our Twitter feed. Go retweet the tweet. Make sure you follow us to be eligible. Tyler, can you believe that there was actually, when I went to give away the Cox by 90 shirt, there were 3 or 4 people I had to skip because they didn't follow us. I was like, how can you retweet it and not follow us? I mean, you have to follow us. I put out the rules specifically, simply. Like, I think maybe people just thought they weren't going to win, so they unfollowed us. I'm like, well, you're lost, I guess. But anyways, make sure you follow us. Make sure you retweet that to be eligible. Stay tuned to the Spurs Up Show as well. We're going to have Trey Dyson on the podcast, former Gamecock, current SEC analyst. Also, coming next week, Michael Roth on the podcast. Extremely excited to have him on, talk a little bit of, his playing days with Carolina baseball, where he's currently at now. Just kind of get his take on the Gamecocks 2018 season and Mark Kingston as well. Also, be sure to check out our merch. Again, I mentioned Kiss the Ring. We've got those T-shirts. They actually match the Carolina Gamecocks jerseys. Be sure to check those out. We've also got the Cox by 90 T-shirts. I know everybody loves those. We've given one of those away. We've actually had, Tyler, every single one of those bought in every color. So very, very happy about that. But the Cox by 90 shirts, would love to see those kind of flooding Williams-Brice Stadium. Well, Founders Park as well, but definitely Williams-Brice Stadium in the fall. It's a really dope shirt. Everybody that's gotten one has given me great feedback on it. They really love those shirts. So check it out. It's on our Twitter feed. You can literally put in hashtag Cox by 90 and you'll see it I mean, it's very, very easy to find. Also, the same thing with the Kiss the Ring shirt. If you just put in hashtag Kiss the Ring, it's there. It's pretty easy to find. Again, the shirt you want to have for baseball season. One little quick footnote, Tyler, before we go. I mentioned that they match the jerseys. So South Carolina is actually rocking new, because this is what the people really want to hear. South Carolina's rocking new Saturday jerseys. I'm sure you saw my text. They're going with the white on white with Carolina. That's more so in like the football jersey script. And the hats are garnet tops with black bills. Did you see that?
I have seen the hats. I've seen the jerseys. I like the hats a lot more than I like the jersey.
Yeah. The jerseys, it's different. It's very different. It's very different. I will say that. I mean, the hats are unique too. That they've been wearing those, I think, the entire fall and spring like practice in. So I like those hats a lot, though. Those are nice. I'm just mad that I bought the exact opposite in the fall with the black top and the garnet bill. But whatever. I'll just get the whole collection, I guess. And then Sundays, actually, not everyone knows this yet, but there's been a slight change. They are going to wear Sunday garnet, but the Gamecocks will still be in black cursive script, but the number is actually in white. So, and the number on the back, I assume, is in white as well. So, not sure how I feel about that, but it'll be interesting to see how it looks. I mean, I love the Sunday garnets. I don't know about you. And then Friday is going to be the traditional white pinstripes with, I assume, the garnet hat. So, like I said, bringing the information the fans really care about, the jerseys. So, it'll be interesting to see kind of, the look and the swag for the Gamecocks. I think you got to wear the black J's as well, though. I was hoping they'd kind of go garnet J's on Friday, white pins on Saturday, black on Sunday, just to mix it up. But
white pinstripes have always been my favorite.
White pins is the traditional. It's you can't go wrong with white pins. And then of course you got the Yankee grays on the road, and you've also got the grays with garnet pinstripes. South Carolina is doing pretty well in the swag department as far as their baseball attire goes. So yeah, with that being said, I mean, again, I think we pretty much covered it all. I mean, extremely excited for baseball season. I mean, we're going to have full coverage every weekend, every midweek game. We'll be coming to you live, probably a lot of Periscope videos, previewing series, previewing games. Obviously stay tuned. Tons of podcasts we'll be kind of going through, following along with you guys in the season, breaking everything down. Should be a fun one. Again, year one of the Kingston era. I mean, I'm really excited. I know, Tyler, you're excited as well. So with that being said, we're gonna wrap this one up. Tyler, you got any last words, anything you want to say before we get, throw the first pitch on opening day?
I got nothing.
Got nothing. All right, cool. Well, again, for Tyler Clark, I'm Chris Phillips. This has been another episode of the Spurs Up Show. Again, be sure to download, rate, subscribe, and share. iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you consume your media, all of our social media handles, you know where to find us. Armchair South Carolina. Again, like I mentioned, Tyler Clark. This is Chris Phillips signing off. We appreciate you guys listening again. We will see you next week, and we will probably see you at Founders Park this weekend for some Carolina baseball, but tune in next week for another episode of the Spurs Up Show. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll catch you next time.